Well, hello, welcome or welcome back to Ride the Stream. I'm here with my very, very good friend, Travis, who is also the co-host of the Ride the Stream vidcast, podcast, whatever. We're just glad you're here. We're excited because we started a new series of Falling Skies. Um, Due largely because Lost went away from from Netflix, but no problem. We are able to pivot on a dime, and we found this series and figured we would talk about the first season. Definitely shorter, not quite the same time commitment that Lost had, but just as interesting. Um, let's see. So, Travis, how are you doing today?
Uh, Not too bad. It's started the day off at 40 degrees.
Ooh, a
So
warm spell.
I mean this mixture of ice snow has not budged much over the last few weeks. So um I think we're all hoping to see some green grass, or I don't care, dead grass at this point. I don't care. That's where I am right now.
Well, and I'm here in Arizona versus the Baltimore area, and we are at 63 degrees. I think we are starting to cool down just a little. We got warm. I think it got up to 85 in the last couple of days. And I think next week we might get some thunder, lightning, and rain. So
Okay.
that might be headed your way after it finishes here. So, but
Well, as
yeah,
long as it's rain.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And it would be nice to have the rain for a bit longer before we have to start turning on sprinklers so our plants don't die this year.
Yeah.
But yeah, so we started last week with the first episode of season one of Falling Skies. Had a really good conversation about the establishing or pilot episode. And we are back to discuss episode two, which is titled The Armory. And this would have originally aired sometime in 2011, I think. I think this is when the series ran,
Like
2011 to about
June.
2015. Yeah. So that just gives you a little perspective of time frame as far as when this originally aired. I don't remember. I'm assuming it was like an NBC or something like that. I don't remember this series. Uh,
TNT maybe?
Oh, TNT, that's right. That's right. I think that's where it was. And like Lost, you are kind of the veteran because you have seen all of it or most of it before,
Most of
versus
it.
myself. I got through season one, and I think the first couple episodes of season two, and we had started talking about doing this as our next series. So I kind of stopped watching like I did with Lost and kind of pivoted back to rewatching the first season. So, Travis, are you kind of ready for me to do our plot synopsis and then we can start digging into our feelings and thoughts about this episode?
Yeah, let's go for it.
Okay, well, great. So, Tom and his team scout out a nearby armory, but are unable to enter the building because a mech has been stationed as a sentry. Weaver is disappointed that Tom did not complete the mission, basically to check out the inside of the armory and see if there are any guns and ammos. Because the Weaver group is now at a school. They've taken over a vacated school and can always use more ammo. Um, so anyway, Weaver tasks Tom and his team to return to the armory and this time discreetly, he emphasized that, discreetly make their way into the building and then report back their findings. This is in contrast to Tom and Hal, who wanted to start going out and looking for Ben. And Weaver said, "No, your priority is this." And Tom is a good soldier. and second in command, and he's like, we'll put Ben on the back burner for the moment. We'll take care of this, and then we want to go. And so the second trip to the armory is successful insofar as that they were able to get into the armory. But then they were attacked by an unknown group who take Tom and his team hostage. Enter Pope and his ragtag group, an independent rebel squad of criminals. Pope determines that Tom is the leader. Well, Tom does do a lot of the speaking, and assesses that the rest of Tom's team, determining that well, they're not family. Obviously there's some sort of little core group of that are out. When Tom, excuse me, when Pope threatens to kill Tom, though, Hal speaks up and says that he can get guns because Pope, that's what he really wants. However, Pope shows his cards a little bit and says that he already knows all about Weaver's group and that he knows what he wants. He wants guns and he wants foods. They've actually been observing Weaver's group for the past couple of days and have been able to retcon a lot of information. So what Pope does is he sends Hal back to the camp with Maggie. Maggie is part of Pope's group. She basically blindfolds him, leads him out so that Hal doesn't know where Pope's camp is. To which Hal goes back to Weaver and tries to broker an arms deal, while the rest of the team are held at Pope's camp. Weaver, however, refuses to give over any guns for trade and tells Dr. Glass to basically have the civilians ready to move in 10. Weaver doesn't want to do anything that will jeopardize the civilians. Um, Hal is basically escapes, and Dr. Glass accompanies him back to the meetup with Maggie and ultimately to the awaiting Pope. Dr. Glass offers to help Pope's brother, who was shot when taking Tom and his team. Pope takes his own squad to go rob Weaver's group because, of course, Hal comes back and says, yeah, we're not giving you any guns. And so Pope surprises Weaver and threatens the civilians, telling Weaver that aliens will have seen the flares that they had, and that they'd be on their way. Basically, instilling some tension and some time crunch. Weaver makes a deal for the hostages and the civilians by saying that he'll give over some of the guns, but not the food. Meanwhile, Tom and the people that are held hostage, Maggie is left behind and she turns coat and kills Pope's brother and the character Cue Ball. He's bald. And because of how she had been abused by them. The hostages and Maggie flee and meet up with Weaver's group to fight Pope and his group. Tom asks Pope to join or die their group. Pope makes a run for it. That's his answer, but is eventually captured by Weaver. He is taken prisoner while Maggie agrees to join the second mass as a fighter. As promised, once Tom has completed his mission, Weaver gives Tom 3 days to go look for Ben. Tom, Hal, his team follow Maggie where she suspects Ben is being held. And I skipped an entire kind of sub uh, thing that was going on, which is basically the question of civilian rights during time of warfare. Um, and that comes up with Dr. Glass and her conversations with both Weaver and Tom. And I figured we'll save that for our chat. So that's kind of, in the nutshell, the main storyline of the episode. And then the subtext is that civilian rights question. I know for you, Travis, even though it's a rewatch, anything that struck a chord for you this time on your second watch?
Um, I think watching this episode, I think episode one is a like a really good intro to the series. You kind of understand the stakes, what's happened, the chilling tale being told by the kids at the beginning of the um and that being said, I think this episode is great. Um it's a great follow-up. Um they cram a lot of stuff in this episode. There are a lot of different interactions. We get some more interactions with character Mike when he talked about um Weaver telling Hal they're not going after her, and they lock Hal away, and the guy Mike is just like, it's a shame about your father, and he's basically tells him like, hey, take my gun, you overpowered me, and just lock me in the closet. And Mike's like, should I hit you? Like, make it look real? And he's just like, no, you're not gonna hit me. It's just
Yep.
um
I love
so
that scene too. I was like, yeah, in a lot of other instances, oh yeah, we got to make it look real. Yeah, go ahead and conk me on the head, so I have a big bump to prove, and Weaver knew. It's like, yeah, really, a 17-year-old kid overpowered you, you
yeah.
know.
So there were a couple moments where there was a little bit of humor, more so than the first episode. That was more apparent, um, not as dry. Um, and just I thought the interactions between the characters were a little more powerful. Um, you had, you know, Tom and Uncle Scott talking about the his interactions with students about,
Hmm.
well, why did the Skitters not create robots that look like them? Like when we think about building robots, we think of building things that are similar to us, bipedal, two arms, two legs. But why didn't the Skitters do that since they are like have what, six or however many legs? And
I think 6 legs, they're pretty ugly looking.
yeah,
Um,
so there were some interesting like nuggets of information put out there. Again, the civilian versus military. I think, and it was also getting that perspective because as Dr. Glass is talking to Tom, they're walking out over to this kind of cliff where in the valley you see all these tents where the civilians are living while the soldiers have the beds in this cul-de-sac or whatever, in houses. And listening to Tom talk about it, because it was surprising. His first thing he said was he thought that civilians were a liability,
and a
and he described
hindrance.
them and
Hmm.
hindrance. But then he followed up by saying they're also the best motivating factor to fight.
Hmm.
Um, so there is this odd, there's no way to truly be safe, even when you have military there, but you need the military. But civilians still want to feel like they're not just in the way or eaters, as the soldiers call them.
Yeah.
Um, which that's got to be like the planet's been devastated. You've survived somehow, and yet, the people who are doing the fighting kind of look down on the civilians in that way, which that's got to be a brutal reality check. And Weaver's, it's like you still try to get a handle on Weaver,
Hmm.
uh, because with that interaction with Hal, where it's like, well, we can't negotiate, or they'll bleed us dry. And
Yeah.
he's like, he's emphasized that he has civilians to protect, which was kind of like, well, I thought that was Tom's role. Like he was supposed to be there to protect the civilians because of Weaver's whatever leadership style, but he somehow adapted to understand, okay, and when Pope threatens to shoot on the civilians, Weaver's just like, all right, I'll give you what you want. But I also like when he's like, I'm gonna get you.
Yeah, it was a real interesting turn because that was not expected, in part for the fact, like you said, Tom is kind of the counterbalance to Weaver's more military focused style. And I mean, he even tells Dr. Glass that when warfare is over, then we'll talk about civilian rights. But, while we're in warfare, civilians don't have rights. And, Dr. Glass even tries to explain, but you don't understand. The civilians are doing the cooking, they're repairing clothing, they're distributing clothes, they're taking care of basically all the domestic aspects so that the military can focus in on being what they need to do, which is to protect and to go out and scavenge for food and ammo and things like that. So they're really they all balance each other. And they're all eaters, honestly. I mean, the military eats, and they're eating more than probably the civilians because the civilians are also probably being rationed so that the military personnel can have more food. Um, so it is interesting that they really do need each other. And so that's why I found when Weaver is actually saying that no, he needs to protect the civilians. It's interesting. It really is trying to gauge where he's military, but he's also understanding when to capitulate for another day.
Yeah.
Uh, yeah.
And also the food they're getting. I don't know if you noticed when they get back after the failed armory attempt and he's talking to Dr. Glass. He's like, yeah, I'm gonna get some food first. And he gets like um it's a big pot of oatmeal and they serve him like tablespoons worth or something like that. It was like that's probably really realistic.
Yeah.
You know, if they have 300 people to feed and their main source of food is oatmeal and they've got who knows, do they have more than one pot? Could be just that one pot. But so I actually thought that was really interesting that they
Hmm.
made sure like, oh yeah, here's your big ladle of oatmeal. Um, but he took it and just imagined what he wanted instead. And so I thought that was a fun way to kind of
Hmm.
um, highlight probably how a situation would be in real life, and also imagining exactly what you'd rather be eating. So,
Yeah.
um,
IHOP, Denny's would sound good. I
as
also,
you watched it, were you like, did you have any feelings coming into this compared to the first episode? Like how, um,
I, I'm gonna say I think chemistry. The fact that there was a lot of chemistry that developed between the first episode and this one, where um, I felt like everybody was congealing and kind of behaving in a manner that you kind of expect them to. Um, so it felt familiar in a way. Um, it felt genuine and authentic, the way that they were kind of coming together. And as each one kind of get into their roles, you see them in like the military in their work mode versus like when Hal and I think her name's Karen, because they're a couple, how they get a little bit of downtime and they get, one of the rooms in the houses that's apparently paper thin walls. So,
another another funny scene.
yep, another funny scene. And they talk about little things like Harry Potter story, which I thought was interesting and kind of telling of the time because those would have been still very popular. And it gives us a little insight to not only 2011 when this was done. But it also gives us insight into Tom's relationship with Hal and Ben and Matt, and the fact that Tom used to read Harry Potter to them. And so
Yeah.
seeing that book brings up memories for Hal, and a little bit of, familiarity with normalcy, which we also get with Uncle Scott when he's teaching the school outside, and teaching the young kids and getting their engagement. And one of the scenes that I really like, we don't get to see it actually happen, but when Uncle Scott relays that, hey, I was talking with the older students, the teenagers, and we were trying to come up with, just like you were talking about, trying to understand the alien hierarchy, their society, and understand why the mechs are, is it bipedal? Is that right?
Yeah.
um, why they're bipedal and they don't have six legs. They don't look like the skitters, which should have been maybe a cue that skitters are lower down on the totem pole. And that whoever built the mechs is going to look more like whatever they haven't seen yet. Um, but I like that, here the kids are engaged and they are part of, they're integral. Whereas where we think of, in our time, if you have kids, you play with them and, all they've got homework and you kind of let them go do their homework. You may not, some parents may not be all that engaged. And now it's like, this is society together. It's a microcosm of a society. And everybody has a piece within that society. They really are an integral part. Even if, you know, Weaver still says, well, you don't really have rights, but he also does see the value and he's been tasked with protecting them, even though that's really Tom's main directive.
Yeah.
Weaver understands that, you know, there is that directive and he does have to temper his military decisions with some of that as well, particularly since Tom has been taken. And, I think something that this episode showed me is just how much Weaver does respect and give credit and value to Tom, where we didn't see it quite as much because they're kind of bucking heads a little bit and they're kind of at odds,
Yeah.
because of their primary directives. So I did like that we saw, a little bit more to Weaver and that he's not just, two-dimensional military figure. He's more complex. And there's more there. So I did like that, and that was something that kind of stayed with me is really the question about civilian rights I thought was really fascinating. But there is so much in this episode, like you said at the
Yeah.
beginning of our conversation.
Yeah. That conversation at the end of the episode where Weaver's talking to Tom about how today wasn't a good day and it could have been a lot worse. And just talking about, you know, Tom and his squad being captured and, you know, recklessness of Hal and Dr. Glass. And but then he goes on and kind of validates why they did it. It's like Hal just doing something to protect his father,
Hmm.
you know. Dr. Glass is civilian, you know, looking out for the people, and she's the only doctor. Um, and so the fact that he's able to not be so narrow vision, tunnel vision,
Yeah.
it makes him more likable and his presence. I really enjoy his presence on screen. There's just something about uh, his voice, his expressions that just seems, even when he's trying to be clear cut, like when uh, Annie comes in, because there's a couple different times where people are in different rooms and they ask if, oh, I wonder what the people that were here were like, or if they knew them.
Hmm.
And it's just so simple where he's drinking some brown spirit and he kind of responds quickly, just like, oh, what can I do for you? And it's just like even in that like he's willing to understand, but he's also just very straight to the point where he's like, okay, come on. What's the conversation? What are we doing here?
Yep.
So he kind of like I think he likes being direct, but he has more flexibility than it would have appeared in the first episode.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Yeah. I think that's a good, you know, reading of his character. And it'll be interesting to see how things go as the weeks progress. Um, I also liked Pope. I thought he was an interesting character, because he talks about how, here he's actually thriving because he can kind of be in his almost natural element, which is, obviously he's a past thug, criminal, maybe killer. Sounds like maybe, he comments how he's been on the wrong side of the law. He's been, had encounters with cops a lot. So, having something to go out and kill the Skitters. Um, he's learned a lot about the makeup of the Skitters, how to kill them. He's really, even though he's a street smart, intelligent, he really has made some very good observations that could be helpful to Weaver's group and increase their chances of success and survival against the aliens. But Pope, and he's almost like one of those people. He's too smart, you know, and he gets in the way of himself, and doesn't, he's so full of himself that he's not thinking that, well, let's look at the bigger picture. He's not a bigger picture type of person. He's all about being in the moment. So when he's talking with Tom, they have a really good, conversation back and forth after Tom is first taken, and the other hostages are taken off somewhere, so that it's just Tom and Pope talking. And, Pope has been able to survive. And like he offers he gives him a cold beer, and Tom's like, this is cold. He's like, oh yeah, we got a refrigerator, I got a generator, and yada yada.
Like, what,
And
we're civilized or something like that.
yeah, and I'm like, well, that's really interesting because that's really a juxtaposition of, and of course, you know, no spoilers, but we'll learn more about Pope in the weeks to come. There's some good twists in there with his character. But just, what he could bring if he would just like get out of the way of his ego, and look at the bigger picture. So I thought that was an interesting message as well. Like here's somebody that could really bring a lot of value, but he's more interested in going out and killing the skitters that he calls cooties, which I thought was interesting. He uses a child's game term for the aliens. Yeah, just thought it was very interesting how Pope and Tom size each other up through that conversation, and I really liked that one. I thought that was a really nice kind of, you know, break in scenes, because it go back and they'd be talking some more, and then go off to showing something else, how with Weaver and stuff like that. So really like that scene between Tom and Pope.
Yeah, Pope is so interesting because he's much more than what he tries to appear. Like he's well informed,
Mm-hmm.
He's educated to a degree, so he like learning that Tom taught American history, which is what Tom told him, and comparing because Pope doesn't think there's any upside to this alien invasion as other than like because he thinks everything's going to go down. He thinks there's no surviving. It's ultimately going to be like just bad news. And that's probably why he is just like you said, just I'm doing whatever I'm going to do.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but he has this capacity to one, he eyes Tom eyeing his brother's gun on his waist.
Mm-hmm.
So he recognizes what Tom's gonna do. Um, but he also talks about like having two kids with their mother in Florida and that he should probably talk about them in the past tense or something like that. Uh, so, but he also described the situation, I think, why he thinks it's perilous because he doesn't think the revolution is the right analogy, like the colonials versus uh the British. He
Mm-hmm.
thinks it's more like the Indians versus the um never-ending tide of humanity, I think is how he put it. So he's definitely got an understanding of history himself.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and the polar opposites of Tom's thinks that they're just getting started, where Pope thinks they're towards the end. Um, I think it's a fascinating way to approach a couple of characters and see do they ever start to merge, where maybe one is starting to lose hope, one is gaining hope, or does one get pulled one way or the other? So like you, I really liked the interactions between them. Pope is yes, he's the leader of us apocalyptic uh pirates, or I don't know how what he
Kind of
called them
Mad
at the end.
Max, sort of,
Yeah.
it's just an interesting group, and him who's obviously, like you said, he's got some education, and yet, yeah, he's pretty fatalistic and just kind of like balls to the wall.
And somehow he's not completely unlikable. He kind of reminds me like
Yes.
Sawyer-esque in a way,
Hmm. Yeah.
where there's, you know, his ability to be perceptive, I think catches Tom off guard, where Tom's like, "Oh, I have to keep my attention focused to see
Hmm.
who this guy truly is." So,
Yeah.
and I think Tom sees the value in him, and that's why he asked him to join.
Yeah, he
Um,
asked him twice to
yeah,
join because he sees his value. Yeah, I really like that. And of course, Pope is not there. Yeah, he is kind of a Sawyer type character as far as like, shady background and, that kind of thing. Um, well,
I was
I
gonna say
know.
real quick, and talk about eliminating an entire criminal underground with one missile, where he drives off and his whole crew just goes
I
like,
know. I know. Well, yeah, well, he doesn't have a whole lot of ties, right? So it's kind of every man for himself. So,
and now it's just him.
and now it's
Well,
just him
behind bars.
behind bars, yes, because he didn't want to join. So, yeah. Well, on that note, I think we'll take a short break and then we will be back to talk about our typical questions that we explore to further kind of dive into the episode where we talk about um, and reveal who our favorite character or characters are, as well as our favorite scene or scenes, since we tend to have, more than one. Yeah.
It
So it's
happens.
okay. So think about, who your favorite character and favorite scene is and see if we are all in agreement, or if we're not, definitely put it down in the comments who your favorite character and scene is. But on that note, we will be back in a jiffy.
Hey everyone, just want to say thank you for joining the stream. Um, we appreciate you for watching or having us on the background. If you haven't had the opportunity, please like this video, maybe give it a subscribe. Really gives Michelle and I a boost to see when that happens. So, yeah, thanks for joining us. And if you can, ride the stream along, and we'll get back to the conversation.
Well, welcome back. We're going to continue our conversation about Falling Skies, Season 1, Episode 2, The Armory, which I guess, were there other scenes that you wanted to talk about, Travis, before we, or any other characters before we kind of get into our questions that we usually do?
Um,
Or they'll come out as we chit chat some more?
yeah, I think they'll probably end up coming out during our
Okay,
exploration of our questions.
okay, sounds good. Well, I guess what we'll do is we'll start with our favorite scene, and then we'll drill down to our favorite character if we haven't been able to guess. So,
Uh,
um,
do you want to start this time?
no, you can go ahead and start. Uh, Now, were you able to focus in on just one, or do you have like a handful of ones that really stood out for you?
So I didn't. I have six listed. I didn't pick one yet.
Oh,
Um,
okay,
so let me run through here. I'll mention an honorable mention.
okay.
Um, uh, the scene where Hal is being walked out by Maggie, although I'm assuming that's the name they gave her because she at the end goes by Margaret. She's walking him out, so that way he doesn't know where they are. He he, he takes off the hood and tries to punch her, completely misses, and she takes him down so easily. And I appreciate that they have that in there. Like she gets on top, holds a knife to his neck, and she's like, "Are you stupid?" And he's just like, "Figured I'd give it a shot." And I liked that they didn't make that some like heroic scene that happened. It was just like, no, she put him in his place and said, I'm more capable than you, dude. Like,
Mhm.
so I just really like that scene.
You know, that's interesting that you bring that up because I'm like, well, that really is a good contrast to Hal's dad, Tom, and how he's, finessing towards the gun, and doing basically, hey, you got to give it a shot, type of thing. But it's interesting to see age, experience, maturity, how they play out, with Tom versus Hal. And they're both basically trying to do the same thing.
Uh,
So
that's a
I
great
love
point.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm going to say one of my honorable mentions. I only have three.
Okay.
So one of my honorables is when Uncle Scott discusses with Tom what his older teenage students hypothesize about the alien society and structure. I think it goes to show and validate the contributions of civilians and academia to warfare. It would get pretty tiring if in every episode Tom puts out there a history lesson, and I like how this was much more subtle. Like he took the hint, hey, hey, we don't need to have a history lesson every 5 minutes. And I like how the episode um, stays real with that kind of thought process and that thread. I like that continuity. Does that mean Tom will never bring up a history lesson? No, I'm sure he will. But he is also mindful that, sometimes it's easier to equate sports to a particular analogy versus, oh, well, even though history kind of is gives more leverage and validity, sometimes you have to go with the flow, and read the room. And I like how that scene shows the contribution of civilians, the fact that they're not just sitting on their ass doing, some domestic work.
Yeah.
They really are trying to be helpful and help problem solve. And obviously we'll see that in the weeks to come, what, some of the problem solving that Uncle Scott does. So I really like
Yeah,
that.
I mean, they're equally providers. I mean, they had that like one scene where they're showing them like with a train of people like by the river gathering water, and I mean, it really does highlight that the entire group, like I think you mentioned earlier, it's like everyone is focused, even the kids, they're focused on this one mission of like survival and how to overcome the invasion. So yeah, another honorable mention I know is the one we touched on earlier, where Hal asks Mike if he wants him to hit him. Um, I just I really liked it. And Mike's reaction is just be like, no, stop. You don't have to physically harm me to make this believable. Um, so I did enjoy that. And on the flip side, I'll just go ahead and add this one in where uh, Weaver is approached by Mike, and you expect me to believe a 17-year-old overpowered you? Um, I had that as another honorable mention scene because that leads into Weaver and Pope's interaction,
Mhm.
which is fantastic. Um, so I'll mention that one too.
Okay. One of my other honorable mentions is, and it's quite high up there. It's the second one on my list. Is when Tom and Anne um, talk about civilian rights and where does Tom fall. I'm going to be honest. I didn't expect Tom to be kind of brutally honest about the fact that civilians are a liability and a hindrance. Um, I didn't expect him to go there with his assessment,
Yeah,
because he is a civilian, honestly. I mean, he is, but he's got kind of an honorary role in the military because of his military knowledge, of history. So, um, I was kind of taken aback by that. But then he basically, I'm going to say, redeems or justifies while he says that he's conveying what a military expert would say or military personnel would say. He also said, on the flip side, but that they're also, our greatest motivator, uh,
yeah,
to to go in and do the best fight that we can. And I thought that was very telling. I really thought that was an incredibly powerful um, moment, that's then highlighted by, the montage of seeing the civilians, working in the valley, all the things that they're doing. They're getting water. They've got the water line going, so that they can capture water. They're doing the food. They're doing the clothing. They're doing all those things so that way the military can focus in on what they do well.
yeah,
I really liked how so that I guess would be another honor, kind of ties into, further mentioning the fact of how that montage, isn't over the top. It shows instead of telling. You know, Annie told. Weaver, and then later they counter and they show the audience what, the civilians are doing and
Yeah.
their living conditions versus the military. Um, so I thought I liked that as well.
Yeah, and it was also kind of dramatic how far apart the civilians and the fighters are. Like they're down in a valley. Um,
Yeah.
but I have to imagine that they have uh, fighter station like they showed when they were doing the Uncle Scott doing the school. They had a fighter on the outside of the class, I guess keeping watch on the woods. So
Mhm.
I have to imagine there are fighters stationed throughout to make sure that civilians would be protected in case an attack happens.
Yeah, and I actually, you mentioned earlier about how Annie and Tom go to the edge and they're looking down in the valley. Kind of really reminded me of the military being up top, being able to watch out for, the civilians, but also, watch out beyond because they're up high, so they're at a vantage point. And they're in a key strategic, position
Yeah,
versus the civilians who are at more risk because they are in a valley and it would take time to get from, the top of the cliff down. But hopefully by having that strategic, they'd be able to actually see stuff ahead of time. But it
no,
really
that's
is a visual, very dramatic visual difference between the two groups.
yeah, no, that's a uh, really good point. Um, I didn't even think about the vantage point or any of that jazz. So yeah, no, that makes some sense then. Um,
What else you got on your
one,
list?
two. Um, I'll mention the other funny scene of Tom walking in on Hal and Karen, where he says,
Yeah.
"Get a room," and Hal's like, "We did.
Yeah.
Don't you knock?" And then he kind of just knocks
Yeah.
on the door, um, and he explains what's happening, um, and then when he says, tomorrow night they'll search for Ben, and Karen says, I'll join." And then a couple different people from elsewhere in the house say, "I'm in, count me in." And
Yeah.
Tom's like, "Oh, thin walls. They can hear everything." He points to both of them. I just thought that was a really interesting way to show the one, you have people ready and willing to like help search for Ben, which is great. But
Yeah.
then just the comedic element of like you got to pay attention to your surroundings even when the door is shut.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
uh,
And I hadn't thought about this before, but you bringing up that scene also gives us a little more insight into the investment in that relationship that we hadn't really seen prior because they're actually kind of touchy, um, more intimate conversation, that we're privy to because they are in a room,
yeah,
and they are behind the door and that type of thing. And that will help solidify a little bit of that relationship because we haven't really got into, other than, Tom, how Ben and Matt and that kind of familial relationship. We haven't had a lot of like, you know, relationship establishment. So I do feel like this episode did go in to try to establish some of the other relationships that are core to Tom, Hal, Tom and Hal, really.
yeah,
Matt is pretty young, so his relationships is with Tom and Hal mostly, also with Anne, to a lesser extent. So it does help give us a little more picture of what those ties are that we didn't get to really see in, the first episode because
Yeah.
otherwise I wouldn't. I think when the first episode, I was like, I didn't know Hal and Karen were together. And yet in this episode, when Lawrence is trying to like flirt with Hal, and then it's like, yeah, he tells Karen, there's only you, there's no competition,
Yeah.
which I think, helps to actually show, again, instead of telling, we're actually seeing visual manifestation of that relationship that, you know, doesn't have a whole lot of time, because of the fact that they're in a war, you know, for survival. And, these things only happen as time allows. And so we get, that small amount of downtime where we get to see humanity and see what's normal during time of war, and still trying to make those human connections where you can. So it's a powerful scene too, even though it's humor. It does help to give us, visual cues into some of those relationships that haven't had a lot of time to manifest themselves. We are only in episode 2.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, well, do you want to? I have two left, but I figure why don't, if you want to share your top,
Sure.
and then I can.
Um, yeah, my top is the conversation between Tom and Pope. I thought the way they're sizing each other up, they're having this civilized conversation when a lot of, undercurrent is going on. Like we can see Tom's inching over towards the gun. He puts the cap down on on the stage where the brother is and the gun is. And if you didn't know the gun was there, you knew by the time Tom was putting that bottle cap over there, what he was doing over there. So while at the same time Pope is sizing him up and, getting to know him, doing little, easy chit chat, and while at the same time sizing him up, see what he's going to do. So I really like the nuances of that scene, and that one really kind of stuck with me, after the episode, and continued to resonate for me because of all the things that they were talking about and not talking about in that scene. So that's my top.
That's my. I I wasn't sure, but I'll make that my last honorable mention and use the other scene as my top.
Mm-hmm.
Because that is a great scene. I feel like we learn more about the enemy from Pope than we have from anyone else. Like he asked Tom if he's killed any of them and about headshots, and then he tells him, "Oh, you've been going about it wrong. Take out some legs first to damage them, weaken them, then you do the headshot." And
Yeah.
he tells him about the ships, about being heat seeking and how it's different from the skidders who rely on motion. And this the way he was talking about firing a bazooka at the ship and how the ship just kind of moved out of the way just to get to avoid the blast. So yeah, really interesting. Um, that was definitely that might have been my top pick, but I'm going to go a different way.
Mm-hmm.
I'll make the top pick the final encounter between Pope and Tom, where they blast on his position after the flares are all set around uh, the 50 cal in the car that they have commandeered from Weaver. Um, and Hope realizes he's pinned down,
Mm-hmm.
and he first asks, "Are those my guns that you're using against us?" He's like, "Yep." um, and he basically asks what his options are because he realizes they're in the line of sight of the flares, which will attract the ship.
Yep.
And Tom just says, "Join or die." And Pope's like, "Very revolutionary." And he's like, "Maybe I just hold out and see what happens with the ship." And Tom's like, "Fine by me."
Hmm.
And I think Pope is just like, well, shit. There's no wiggle room here, and I think that's where I guess Tom has his knowledge of warfare and positioning. He
Yeah,
told his troops to hold fire so they didn't like waste ammunition. Um, and then when the alien ship comes, that's when Pope is trying to get in the car and he just hightails it out there as a bomb blasts the rest of his crew away.
yeah.
I just thought that was such an interesting encounter because the foot was on the other shoe, or the
Hmm.
shoe was on the other foot. Uh, Pope had the lead in the first scene. Tom had the lead in the end scene, and uh, yeah, just their dynamic together really works well.
Yeah, yeah, it really does. Sorry, I have a kitty cat that wanting to lay on the mouse. So no kitty sighting yet, unless he decides to. No, he's stretching out further. Yeah. Um. Well, I'm very curious who you're going to go with as a favorite character. And did you have a short list of characters, or did you have kind of a long one? Was it easy, or did you find it kind of challenging?
It was challenging.
I
Um,
felt it challenging too.
um, I listed five because I appreciated the moments that they were on screen, even if it wasn't a ton.
Hmm.
Um,
All right, why don't you start, and then when we get, because I only have two. Um, so why don't you do your three, and then we'll go back and forth with the
okay.
last two.
Um, First honorable mention, I'll mention Mike. Uh, because again, that scene I think is hilarious, but he also pops up elsewhere, talking about, kids with harnesses. So it appears that he has a kid who's also harnessed because he had a
Yeah.
conversation with Tom, conversation with Hal. Um, and so there seems to be a closeness there that maybe we'll see more of Mike as the series moves on. Um, I did mention uh, Weaver
Hmm.
because I do like his presence. I like seeing him being adaptable. And the third one that's because it's between two really. I did put Maggie slash Margaret
Oh, okay.
because she just seemed like very capable, but when she kills the brother in cue ball and tells why, very intense. That both of them abused her, um, and that she was captured by them 3 months ago. So, not even knowing, God, was that a daily occurrence or, um,
That's true.
and so when she does what she does and then explains it, it's like she instantly becomes like, I'm rooting for this person.
Hmm.
Like, so I thought that was a very powerful scene of her just quick. I mean, it's not a long moment. Like she just kind
Hmm.
of runs through it. Um, yeah. So
Very cool. Yeah. Um, yeah, that's pretty powerful. I mean, you get really sucker punched with that revelation because you're not really expecting it because you think she's pretty integrated into Pope's group.
yeah,
And that was a real surprise. Yeah, definitely. My runner-up, since I think you've got two, right? Okay,
yeah,
my runner-up is Pope. I felt he was a real interesting character who isn't a good guy, But you have to admit that he has more hands-on experience and knowledge regarding the aliens. Um, and I think you really hit it earlier. He is sort of a Sawyer type. So even though he is a bad guy, as far as
Yeah.
his background and stuff like that, there is also something that's kind of likable about him, begrudgingly.
Yeah.
But, I do find that I like his no nonsense and his like kind of crash, you know, um, behavior and because I do realize that he has a lot of knowledge and he does have value. And he is a person. And so I did like him. I like whoever the actor is. I don't he looked familiar to me, but I didn't happen to look up the actor. But I think the actor that does Pope does a really great job.
Yeah.
And I just thought Pope was such an interesting character. Um, and we do get a fair amount of him in this episode, so he's my runner-up. What about you?
I'll agree.
Oh, okay. Pope was your runner-up?
Yeah, it's close. His performance is so out there. Like that initial sequence, he has control of everything.
Hmm.
Like he knows what's going on, what's going to happen. Um, you know, even when he leaves to go ambush Weaver, he tells his brother, like, don't just kill people because you want to. That's why I'm leaving Maggie and Cue Ball. And it's
Hmm.
like, so he's very aware of how bad the people are that he's running with.
Hmm.
Um, so yeah, he does look familiar. I even to the end when Tom is telling him, "Oh, you should have taken me up on my offer," and he's just
Hmm.
like, I've been running this ragtag group of criminals. I'm exhausted. I need some rest. And it just him admitting that, that he's just gonna like lie down in his cell for a while, take it easy. It's kind of comical, but maybe that will be a way for him to, you know, refresh his perspective.
Yeah. So I just doing a quick look-see. The guy that plays Pope is Colin Cunningham, and he might look familiar to people that are into the Stargate franchise. He was Major Lieutenant Colonel Paul Davis on Stargate SG-1 and Stargate Atlantis. So
Oh,
anyway, yeah. So
okay.
that's him. He's been in some other stuff. He's also a director, so he's directed actually a number of music videos for the country music television CMT. So anyway, yeah, he's kind of a well-rounded individual.
Yeah. All right. Who do you got at the top?
Weaver.
Okay.
I went with Weaver, because he puts in some twists there. That he's pro-military, but he's also been tasked with kind of protecting the civilians because that's the secondary objective, right? That's Tom's leadership role. Um, and I feel like he had to be there was more to his character in this episode because he's not just military. He's got to balance out the various elements of his leadership. And I thought that he's was being a good leader by, one, choosing not to, kowtow to uh, a terrorist man, so to speak, if we're using our vernacular of today. He chose not to um, make any sort of negotiation. And however, he does see that he needs to make a negotiation right at the end. But I think he's also countering the fact that, the aliens are on their way. He's in a circle of flares. I'm on the outside. So I'm probably going to win this. So I think, he has to be calculated. And I just like how we get to see more depth to him in this episode, that he's not just a military figure and he's not just completely driven by his military experience, that he does have a heart and, he is, you know, looking out for civilians because that is his reason. And I think, deep down, he's taking to heart that he's fighting for our civilians because that's the future.
Yeah.
Military too, but because when the military is done, they go back to being civilians. So I think ultimately, that's his core because he's also a civilian. He, had a wife, he had a family. We don't know what his backstory is yet, but that'll eventually, you know, come out and we'll know that, he's human too, and he has that core value just like everyone else. So
Yeah.
that's why I chose Weaver. I just thought he had to walk kind of a thin line and find a balance with those two directives. And I think he showed there's a reason that he's in the leadership role for the second mass, and I think he showed it very well in this episode. So that's why I
Yeah.
went with Weaver. Okay.
Yeah, that's a good pick.
And you?
Well, I feel like I went with Tom. It was a little more sentimental. Um, I mean, I really like the interactions with Pope. Um, uh, I liked towards the end, we actually, because he spends most of his days with Hal, but he doesn't
Mhm.
get to spend a lot of time with Matt. So it was nice to be able for him to like keep a promise and play, throw a lacrosse ball around with some lacrosse sticks, and just seeing that side of him, knowing that he's juggling a lot.
Mhm.
So that blended in with his interactions with Pope and him trying to be sly and um, uh, yeah, this just made me really like his character even more. So
Mhm.
um, yeah, that's it.
Well, I know we got to be wrapping up. Are there any other scenes that we didn't catch in our discussion, or do you think we kind of hit on everything that you wanted to hit on?
Um, I don't think so. I think we were able to pretty much hit on everything. Yeah.
Mhm. All
What about
right.
you?
No, I think we hit on everything. I think the only thing is that I would say that Jimmy is a 13-year-old boy. He is part of the military arm, and he is part of what makes up Tom's squad when they first go to the armory. And unfortunately, due to they use the dog Nemo to see if there's any mechs, and I was like, there better not be a dead dog at the end of the scene. And there wasn't, but Jimmy is attached to the dog. It makes total sense. And of course, he leaves his post because he's worried that the dog's going to get killed by the mech. And so, Weaver makes the decision to have him stand down when Tom and his group go back to the armory. So I felt bad for Jimmy because, oh my gosh, everything that would have to be on his shoulders as a 13-year-old. He's not really a kid. He's like an adult in a kid's skin.
And
Um,
his substitute got killed.
yeah, yeah. So, yeah. So anyway, that was the only thing that I wanted to kind of touch on as far as the episode. But I invite all of our listeners and viewers, um, who was your favorite character and what was your favorite scene? Was there any that we missed? Did we miss some nuances that you're like, hey, why didn't you talk about this or that? Definitely put it down in the comment section. And if you do have any spoilers, just, do a little spoiler alert so that way those that are kind of watching each episode and then coming and listening and watching us discuss, yeah, so that way they don't get a spoil. But otherwise, really enjoyed our conversation. Next week, we'll be back for episode 3 and looking very much forward to it. I'm enjoying our deep dive of Falling Skies and looking forward to continuing that. Otherwise, thanks, Travis, so much for recommending this series that we do a discussion on, and hope you have a good week. And thanks everyone who came and spent some time with us today in this episode. We look forward to seeing you back again. If you can, subscribe, hit the notification bell. We do occasionally have a surprise episode that pops up on a different day when we talk about a movie. We've got a banger coming up. So if you like our movie discussions, we've got one coming in the near future, and looking for very much to that. Otherwise, thanks so much everybody for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you next week, where we'll continue to ride that stream.